Welcome to today's edition of Q&A with Terry with the Word. And today we're going to go over another verse that unbelievers just love to throw at Christians. They even make many memes about it. And this is in Exodus. The verse is Exodus 21:20. And if a man smite his servant or his maid with a rod, and he die under his hand, he shall be surely punished. 21. Notwithstanding, if he continue a day or two, he shall not be punished, for he is his money. So it's Exodus 21, verses 20 through 21. I'll read it again. And if a man smite his servant or his maid with a rod, and he die under his hand, he shall be surely punished. Notwithstanding, if he continue a day or two, he shall not be punished, for he is his money. Oh, how unbelievers love this verse. However, they completely misinterpret it, and they just pull this verse all willy-nilly out of the Bible without regarding the meaning, the Hebrew translation, the culture of the time, or any other context in the Bible. So we're going to break it down. So first off, the slave is there on his own free will because it's strictly forbidden to capture free men and make them slaves. It was also forbidden to sell men to other men. In Exodus 21:16, it reads, And he that stealeth a man and selleth him, or if he be found in his hand, he shall surely be put to death. So, taking a free man and making him captive or selling men to other men was punishable by death, according to God's law. Now, a slave, well, the Hebrew word that they're using as slave in this translation of the Bible that the unbelievers like to pull is actually ebed, and I'm sure I pronounce it wrong. But what it actually is a contractual servant. It's not a slave that was stolen as a free man and put into bondage. This is a contractual servant. Notice in the verse of Exodus 21:20, it says, if a man smite his servant or his maid. This is a servant. There's a big difference between stealing men and trading men, forcing them to do hard labor while beating them and even killing them. The heathen nations that did this sort of thing, most of them had no law or protection for slaves who were considered property, and they could do as they pleased with their slaves with no repercussions whatsoever. But there's laws laid in the Bible, and these may be the earliest record of protecting servants. And I'm using the word servant because that is what an ebed was, and most biblical translations don't even use the word slave. The King James Version uses servant as well, as we just read. And the unbelievers that are pulling this verse, they're pulling this verse out of Bibles using the term slave on purpose just to further enhance their agenda, which is convincing themselves that they're right. They're trying to justify their position here, and they're entangling others in this web of deceit that God is somehow evil because he permits beatings of slaves, which is absolutely wrong, and we're proving that right now. There are many reasons why a man would voluntarily become a servant, which he voluntarily, which we just said, became a servant of his own free will. The man may have entered into poverty, and this was his only way to survive, was to offer his labor as services in exchange for money or housing. And this may be for himself or because he has a family that he needs to care for. The man may have wanted to learn a new trade. This would be similar to like internships or journeyman today. He may have owed a debt and he didn't have money to repay the debt, so he offered his services to repay the debt. He may have been a thief that had been caught and he needed to work off his debt because he didn't have the money to repay the value of what he stole. Or this could just be his occupation. I mean, maybe he has no cattle. He doesn't have a homestead of his own. He inherited nothing, similar just to working your job today. Because if you're not an entrepreneur the owner of a business, being in business for yourself, then you're a servant to the company that you work for. You do labor in exchange for money, whether it be a corporate business or if you're even a hired farmhand at a ranch. And let's just get it straight right now that servants were not to be mistreated. And 99.9% of the time, they were not mistreated. It was commanded by God to treat servants extremely well. I mean, before Abraham's children were born, Eliezer, his servant, was beneficiary of his entire estate. They had days off. In Exodus 23:12, it reads, 6 days thou shalt do thy work, and on the seventh day thou shalt rest, that thine ox and thine ass may rest, and the son of thine handmaid and the stranger may be refreshed. So servants, their children, strangers sojourning with you, even your livestock rested. Servants were to be treated with great kindness and not to be mistreated. We were always, and we still are, to do unto others as we want them to do unto ourselves. It says this in the Bible. The golden rule that we know comes straight from the Bible. Leviticus 25:38 reads, I am the Lord your God, which brought you forth out of the land of Egypt to give you the land of Canaan and to be your God. And if thy brother that dwelleth by thee be waxen poor, and be sold unto thee, thou shalt not compel him to serve as a bondservant, but as an hired servant, and as a sojourner. He shall be with thee, and shall serve thee unto the year of Jubilee. And then shall he depart from thee, both he and his children with him, and shall return unto his own family, and unto the possession of his father shall he return. For they are my servants, which I brought forth out of the land of Egypt. They shall not be sold as bondmen. Thou shalt not rule over him with rigor, but shalt fear thy God. So, even the poor of the land, if you've seen them, take them in. Take care of them. Let them sojourn with you. Okay? Treat them as hired servants or sojourners in your household. Because remember, I am the God that brought you out of Egypt. You remember what it was like to be a bondman. So we don't treat others that way. And you will keep him there till he gets on his feet. Then he and his whole family in the year of Jubilee will leave. And you are not to rule over him with rigor, because you shall fear God, because God punishes those who rule over others with vigor. So take in the poorest servants, treat them well with all that they need, and release them in the year of Jubilee. And Deuteronomy 15:7, if there be among you a poor man of one of thy brethren within any of the gates in thy land, which the Lord thy God giveth thee, thou shalt not harden thine heart, nor shut thine hand from thy poor brother, but thou shalt open thine hand wide unto him, and shalt surely lend him sufficient for his need in that which he wanteth. Beware that there be not a thought in thy wicked heart, saying, the 7th year, the year of release is at hand, and thine eye be evil against thy poor brother, and thou givest him not, and he cry unto the Lord against thee, and it be a sin unto thee. Thou shalt surely give him, and thine heart shall not be grieved when thou givest unto him, because that for this thing the Lord thy God shall bless thee in all thy works, and in all thou puttest thine hand unto. For the poor shall never cease out of the land. Therefore I command thee, saying, thou shalt open thine hand wide unto thy brother, to thy poor, and to thy needy in thy land. Give him everything. This is me talking now. They were to give the poor, take him in, give him everything he wanted, and do not have a wicked thought in your head saying, oh geez, he's leaving now. I'm gonna have to give him stuff. I'm gonna have to release him. Nope, we were not to think those things or be greedy in any way. And the Lord says, when you let him go and you give him Give him graciously provisions to be on his way, and the Lord will bless you. So, and the servant's contract ended. So, and you were to give him these provisions. It was like getting a pension, a big pension for his labors for being with you. And Deuteronomy 15:12. And if thy brother, a Hebrew man or a Hebrew woman, be sold unto thee, and serve thee 6 years, then in the 7th year thou shalt let him go free from thee. And when thou sendest him out free from thee, thou shalt not let him go away empty. Thou shalt furnish him liberally out of thy flock, and out of thy floor, and out of thy winepress, of that wherewith the Lord thy God has blessed thee. Thou shalt give unto him. And thou shalt remember that thou wast a bondman in the land of Egypt, and the Lord thy God redeemed thee. Therefore I command thee this thing to this day. So there you have it. Remember again that you were a bondman in Egypt, and I brought you out. You remember what that was like. So when your brother has finished in his Jubilee, when you let him go and you furnish him liberally. He is not to go away empty. You give him everything. You give him out of your flock, your floor, your winepress, because God has blessed you, so you bless unto him. You give unto him. You remember what it was like. Don't send him away empty. Leviticus 19:34. But the stranger that dwelleth with you shall be unto you as one born among you, and thou shalt love him as thyself. For ye were strangers in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. Again, the Lord is commanding them. Remember what it was like to be a stranger in the land of Egypt. So the one that is dwelling with you as a servant to you shall be unto you as one born among you. Treat him as your son or your daughter, and love him. Colossians 4:1. Masters, give unto your servants that which is just and equal, knowing that ye also have a master in heaven. So again, you masters were to give unto their servants that which is just and equal, always treating them fairly, always treating them justly, loving them as if they were your own sons or daughters. And when their time is up, because they were always released on the Jubilee, that you give plenty to them to be on their way. Provisions. So most servants were treated so well that they didn't want to ever leave. And there were laws for this as well, outlined in Deuteronomy and Exodus. And it was punishable. I mean, punishment was outlined. It's outlined in the Bible for mistreating servants. Exodus 21:23. And if any mischief follow, then thou shalt give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burning for burning, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. And if any man smite the eye of his servant or the eye of his maid, that it perish, he shall let him go free for his eye's sake. And if he smite out his manservant's tooth or his maidservant's tooth, he shall let him go free for the tooth's sake. See, if you hurt a servant, it was eye for an eye, life for life, tooth for tooth, punishment. And thy servant must be set free. The Lord does not require any repayment of debt by the servant or any servanthood under the hand of a man who mistreats his servant. Whatever you do to that servant, it'll be done unto you. And that servant's going free. And they will never serve you again because you mistreated them. And if a servant runs away because of mistreatment, no one is allowed to return that man or woman to the man who mistreated them. That is also forbidden by God. Deuteronomy 23:15. Thou shalt not deliver unto his master the servant which is escaped from his master unto thee. He shall dwell with thee, even among you in that place which he shall choose in one of thy gates, where it liketh him best. Thou shalt not oppress him. So if you find a servant that ran away from his master because of any mistreatment, You are not to oppress him. You are not to send him back. He will stay wherever he chooses in the city, wherever he likes best. He's not to go back. And if a servant became rich on his own while he was under contract to pay off a debt, or any member of his family became rich, he could just pay his debt, buy his way out of his contract, and just go on his merry way. In Leviticus 47, it says, "And if a sojourner or stranger wax rich by thee, and thy brother that dwelleth by him wax poor, and sell him unto the stranger or sojourner by thee, or to the stock of the stranger's family, and that he is sold, he may be redeemed again by one of his brethren may redeem him. Either his uncle or his uncle's son may redeem him, or any that is nigh of kin unto him, or his family may redeem him, or if he be able, he may redeem himself. And if he shall reckon with him that bought him from the year that he was sold to him unto the year of Jubilee, and the price of his sale shall be according unto the number of years, according to the time of a hired servant shall be with him. If there be yet many years behind him, according unto them he shall give again the price of his redemption out of the money that he was bought for. And if there remain but few years unto the year of Jubilee, then he shall count with him, and according unto his years shall he give him again the price of his redemption. And as a yearly hired servant shall he be with him, and the other shall not rule with rigor over him in thy sight. And if he be not redeemed in these years, then he shall go out in the year of Jubilee, both he and his children with him. For unto me the children of Israel are servants. They are my servants, who I brought forth out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God." So, you're working off your debt, and if you stumble into riches, or any of your family member became rich, they could go to your employer and pay off your debt, buy your way out of your contract, and you were gone. You could just go on your merry way. You could redeem yourself, or any of your kinsmen could redeem you. And if you couldn't redeem yourself, you were let go in the year of Jubilee. Right there. Now, also it says, well, let's just get to the chase. So in Exodus 21:20, "If a man smite a servant or his maid with a rod, and he die under his hand, he shall be surely punished. Notwithstanding, if he continue a day or two, he shall not be punished, for he is his money." So what does this mean? Well, first we know that murdering servants is punishable by death, life for life. We just read it. So, right there, if he smites his servant or his maid with a rod, and he die under his hand, he'll be surely punished, which is going to be death, because he killed the servant. If he continues for a day or two, meaning it was accidental, the employer's punishment is financial loss from losing the repayment of the debt that the servant owed, and the medical treatment that he paid for, and trying to save his servant because he was required to do so. So this would be like having different degrees of murder and manslaughter. We know that servants could not be mistreated, but anyone could be punished. We don't know what this servant did to receive the beating. It could be a bad apple employer who needs to be punished by law. I'm not going to say it's not. I mean, out of that, 99.99% of servants were treated really, really well. I mean, this very well could be a case of that 0.1%. So this guy is obviously going to be punished life for killing a servant. So this could be a bad apple employer who needs to be punished by law. But it could be that this servant stole items. He killed livestock. He raped a woman of the household. He could have killed any member of the household. He could have peeped at his wife through windows while she was dressing. He could have beat the employer's child. He could have inappropriately touched any member of the household. We don't know. But since most servants were treated exceedingly well by God's law, it's most likely that this servant did something extremely severe in order to be punished this severely. But we can only assume what it was that he did. And the Bible doesn't condone beatings. And the employer can be called to the judges to be published or punished for this instance. The laws were laid out, and these were designed for both the servant and the employer to be treated fairly and ultimately to protect the servants. I mean, herein we have an employer who kills a slave and will be punished life for life, most likely according to the word of God elsewhere in Exodus 21:23. It laid that out, that they would be punished life for life. In other nations, there was no protection for a bondman or punishment for any slave owner who killed a slave. Those heathen nations did whatever they wanted with whoever they wanted. They bought and sold men and women. They forced them into hard labor. They whipped and they killed them, like we seen what the Hebrews went through in Egypt. Hebrews did not have slaves as we think of slaves. It was strictly forbidden to take a free man or to sell men. Therefore, they were not in the slave trade business either. It was strictly forbidden by God. So here, again, we have an owner, employer of a servant working to pay off a debt or labor of his house who did something very severe, and he punished him. And if he died, well, life for life. The employer is going to be punished with his life. But if he hung on for a few days and then he died, this was them saying that if he didn't mean to kill him, he did not commit murder, he just beat him severely and he ended up dying, then the punishment is in that, one, the loss of the debt that the servant was to repay, and also the loss of finance for trying to save him through medical treatment. That was his punishment. The loss of money. That was the punishment for the manslaughter. See, the Hebrews treated their servants who voluntarily served with respect and love by order of God, and even sent them on their way after their contract ended with provisions. And servants could run away any time and not have to return if they thought they were mistreated. Servants had protection under God's law, and most were treated so well that they stayed for life. And this verse herein is just protecting the servant. Because again, other heathen nations could do whatever they wanted with people. They sold them and they killed them with no punishment. But here, an employer was punished if a servant died. And if the servant accidentally died, as in manslaughter, then he was punished by not having his debt repaid and all the expenses for medical treatment. That was his fine, according to the law. So I hope that clears that up, and you can actually see that no, God does not condone beating slaves. Again, we don't know what this servant did to condone the beating. It must have been something pretty bad, but God does not condone murder neither, so there was punishment for the murder and there was punishment for the accidental murder, unlike other nations who did whatever they wanted, and there were no repercussions for anyone. So thanks for joining us for this Q&A session on Exodus 21. I believe we were at Exodus 21. Yeah, 20 through 21. And join us next time as we have another Q&A. And we hope that that cleared that up for everybody and it made perfect sense. So join us next time. Thanks again. Be vigilant, be sober, and God bless.